Last week, LEAX published their report for the second quarter of 2022, still on their way towards the Nasdaq stock market. And standing beside me, I have its CEO, Tony Nicol. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
You released a report last week. How did it feel?
It felt great, actually. I think it was a pretty strong quarter for us. We saw our revenues come back in a pretty good way, and our underlying profitability was about what we expected.
Indeed, growth has returned, a more positive quarter than Q1, and that is reflected in your results. And we dig now into the report. Sales are growing again, 539.8 million in revenue. Compared to last year's second quarter of 466.2. Profits as well, landing on 18.6 million compared to last year's second quarter of 17. Tell us, what was it that worked differently during the quarter?
Well, I think all of our markets were pretty robust in the quarter. At just over 500 million, it's one of our strongest quarters on record. So from the revenue side, it was there, which leads to pretty good absorption when the factories are running full. On the profitability side, again, it was a pretty strong quarter. Couple of one-timers related to our IPO process and raising capital, which is kind of non-recurring expense, which kind of prevented us from really kind of smashing the quarter from a profitability perspective. Excuse me, but we're quite pleased with the quarter.
Indeed, and while top line and bottom line both increased, the middle line in the form of your operating profit did decrease. The decrease was slight, but did raise an eyebrow. However, what happened?
Well, that's exactly what I'm referring to there, is that we had some one-time external costs related to raising equity in the company. So really the underlying profitability of the company is exactly where we need it to be outside of these one-time costs.
And top line and bottom line then, they are improving, as you said. Tell us, are you getting used to the sort of macroeconomic situations that we found ourselves in the first half of the year?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure if one can get used to what's going on in the world today. It's it just seems to be one crisis after another. So I think getting used to it is probably not an accurate description, but just being on our toes, being flexible, being fast is helping us to react. So there definitely is some training that's been going on in the last couple of years.
And as we are on the subject of the world situation currently, we talked a lot about the supply chain issues that have affected you in the last couple of quarters. Though looking at your results, it says the opposite. Tell us, how has the supply chain issues developed?
Well, it's still a challenge. As I wrote in the quarterly report, supply chain issues persist. Lead times for things like raw materials, steel, castings, forgings are still extremely long. We're still seeing hiccups from the semiconductor crisis. It's still there's still under capacity in that part of our supply chain. Things, obviously, if you look at the quarter, we've had a strong quarter revenue-wise. So there are signs of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. But there are challenges still out there that we're having to manage.
You mentioned raw materials there, and I'm curious how inflation has affected it.
Well, we're seeing inflation. I mean, there's just no question. And, as we're, tend to be in the metal working part of the business, we're buying a lot of steel. The energy prices are absolutely affecting the raw material costs, as there's a lot of energy in the steel making process, energy used in the steel making process. But, we're pretty, I'll say, insulated through the type of contracts we have, so we're able to pass on some of those increases up through the supply chain.
Talk to us a little bit more about energy, because I noticed that most of your manufacturing facilities is in the southern part of Sweden, where the energy prices are considerably the worst. Could you tell us how you're managing it and how it affects you more?
Yeah, we're doing kind of I think a multitude of things to try and manage energy. certainly we're trying to reduce the amount of energy that we're utilizing. That's kind of the key thing. And as we look to to firm up our science-based targets, energy consumption is a big thing for us to reduce. And then we're just kind of managing the costs by trying to shut down when we can in terms of peak, when energy is at its peak cost, and run at night, for example, to try and reduce the costs. And just try to manage, again, through the supply chain. If we can pass any of that on to our customers, we certainly try.
We'll move on now, and if we read about the highlights, we see that the first highlights is the AMF investments. We talked a little bit about this in the first quarter. The short story is that they invested 300 million SEK in a shares issue, and 108 SEK came also to the company through the owners. A full quarter now with AMF. What's your impression having them as a major shareholder?
Our impression is excellent. I think all of your viewers will know who AMF is as one of the largest institutional investors in Sweden.
Of course.
And we just have a tremendous amount of respect for the team at AMF. These are seasoned investors. I think the great thing for LEAX is they understand our business. They're not calling every quarter, just to see, what the monthly result was. They understand that this is a long-term business. This is a long-term investment for them. But it just gives us a lot of confidence that someone like AMF can see the underlying value in LEAX and also, supports the vision that we have for the company.
And has more institutional investors expressed their interest?
Yeah, people have expressed interest, and as you know, we were heading towards an IPO. It was scheduled to be around this time of the year, as we announced. Obviously, the turbulence in the markets had us pause. But there's a lot of interest in LEAX, and certainly with someone like AMF on board, they bring a certain amount of marketing to the company by their name recognition.
Of course, but with the money that you got from this investments, you intended to repay your bonds, which you have done. Could you tell us more about the repayment? How much money was allocated toward this end?
Well, the bond that we had was 300 million SEK. So we paid the bond back in full, and basically what we see through that transaction was a debt to equity swap. So we reduced the company's debt. We absolutely improved the balance sheet, and ultimately our financial net is improving because of that investment.
I see. Well, we'll move now towards the IPO. We're seeing IPO and shares issues slowly appearing more and more in news feeds once again. And you mentioned at the start there that you had one-time costs towards this IPO. Tell us, are we closer?
Well, we're absolutely closer, and obviously we're watching the market, and our intention is still to list the company. We have been approved by NASDAQ to list, so all of that work that took place in the first half of this year and the last quarter of 2021 is expense and experience that holds us in good stead when we decide to list. We're just going to take it kind of one day at a time here. Obviously, with AMF on board and our majority shareholders, to get input from them as to the timing. But we're not going to rush to list. We're going to just wait for the exact right timing to do it.
With the AMF investments, you transformed the debt to equity, you said. But with this IPO, I assume that the financing will be used to more operational means. Which ones?
Yeah, I think that's, we're looking, for the IPO to do a couple of things. Number one was to help our balance sheet situation. Certainly the AMF investment and the equity investment that the founding partners put into the business has helped us do that. So the next step for us would be just to continue the growth and use any funds from a capital raise to help us continue to grow the company.
And as we look forward to that, what else have we to look forward to as we move into the second half of the year?
Well, I think we have a lot to look forward to. I think I wrote in the quarterly report about a KPI. I like to talk about business activity. These are really kind of unprecedented times. You know, we're seeing so much activity despite what's going on in the world. And that activity is leading to a tremendous amount of opportunities for us. The key focus for the company is really executing in the short term on the programs and projects that we have, managing, you know, the turbulence in the markets and the supply chain, but also being kind of laser focused on our strategy. And that's really to increase the engineering content in the products that we provide and diversify the end markets that we're supplying to help us de-risk the company. And I think you'll see signs in the upcoming quarters that our strategy is on track.
Then I'll keep an eye out for that. Tony Nicol, that was all my questions, but I thank you very much for your time and wish both you and LEAX continued luck.
It's my pleasure, Michael.